Long a pillar of the Constitution's 14th Amendment, the Trump administration challenged the law with an executive order. It bans birthright citizenship for children born to undocumented immigrants, breaking 160 years of legal precedent. Paul Finkelman is a 14th Amendment expert and an expert in the history of the U.S. Constitution, a visiting professor at the University of Toledo College of Law. Professor, welcome back to CTW.
It's nice to be here. I was here yesterday talking about the lead up to this, and now we're talking about what happened today.
Indeed, we are. I want to start by reading the section of the 14th Amendment, the first sentence that got the most attention at the very start of the hearing. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. Those words, jurisdiction thereof, caught the attention of Chief Justice John Roberts when he described the government's examples that they were using to sort of justify their interpretation of those words as quirky. How do you take that response from the Chief Justice?
Well, I think it shows that the language of the 14th Amendment is absolutely crystal clear. If you are born in the United States, you are a citizen with what was originally 3 exceptions, and we are now basically down to 2. The biggest exception is if your parents are diplomats and they have diplomatic immunity, then they are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So if a foreign diplomat, for example, commits a crime in this country, that person cannot be prosecuted because they are not subject to our jurisdiction. All we can do is expel that diplomat. Okay, so diplomatic immunity. The child of the ambassador from England who is born here is not a U.S. citizen. The other 2 exceptions are if the child is born from an invading army. Well, the last time an army invaded the United States was during the War of 1812. There was a small Japanese army contingent on one of the Aleutian Islands during World War II. Nobody lived on that island. Other than that, we haven't been invaded. There's no invading army.
Justice Gorsuch asked General Sawyer directly, are Native Americans native-born citizens in this country? The answer was somewhat circular in its logic.
So here's the easy answer. If you flip back to 1868, there are large portions of the United States that are not physically or in any other way under the control of the United States. Think, for example, of the Montana Territory or the Idaho Territory or what is today South Dakota and North Dakota. They are owned by the United States. There's no military presence there. There's no government presence there. The only people living there full-time are Native Americans. So they are in the United States, but they are not subject to our jurisdiction. If you think about General Custer going into South Dakota, he tried to assert American jurisdiction over South Dakota. He died in the process. So in the beginning, Native Americans living in tribal communities, living on tribal lands, if they were born here, were not citizens of the United States because they weren't subject to our jurisdiction. They were citizens of their own tribe. That is no longer the case. In 1924, Congress passed a law saying all Native Americans, whether they're on tribal land, whether they're on reservations, born here, they are citizens. Before 1924, Native Americans living within the political realm of the United States and governed by local or state law were citizens if they were born here.
And I want to ask you about the presence of President Trump. First time a president has ever attended a hearing of the Supreme Court involving a case that his administration is a part of. Your thoughts on that?
I think this was President Trump's attempt to intimidate the court. I think he somehow believes that if he is there, the justices will be afraid to rule against him. That strikes me as completely idiotic. The justices don't care who's in the courtroom. They care about the law. They care about the arguments. The fact that President Trump showed up and then only listened to his own Solicitor General and then left because he didn't want to hear the other arguments shows that he's not intellectually engaged in any of this. This is all about his ego and his power, and the fact that he attacks the Supreme Court in unprecedentedly vicious language when he doesn't like their opinions shows that he doesn't care about the rule of law, doesn't care about the court. And I guess he thought if he was there, they would be afraid of him. I suspect they are not.
I'll leave all of that to your opinion there, sir. I'm sure there are some that might disagree, but your opinion's been duly noted. Professor Paul Finkelman with the University of Toledo College of Law. Professor